To solve quadratic equations using square root, okay, which will be a new strategy for us. Sometimes you can use more than one method, sometimes only one method will work. We are going to leave our answers in simplified form where appropriate. Okay, so go ahead and look at A. A says x squared equals 25. Now in your head, you could probably think of a solution for this. It looks like x equals 5 because 5 squared is 25, but because it's quadratic, there should be two answers. So what would the second answer be for this? -5, because -5 squared is -5 times -5, which is also positive 25. Now, how do I find this answer? By showing my work, though. Okay, this is x to the second power. The opposite of squaring something is square rooting something. So to cancel out the exponent 2, I use a square root. If I square root the left side, I have to square root the right side. Okay, the squared and the square root cancel, so I get x equals, and then for my answer, I already knew that I could get 5 or -5, which are both of my answers. Okay, and it's good to write your answer like this. Another way you could write it is you could say x equals, and you put a plus and a minus sign on top of each other, positive or -5, and that's just the lazy way of writing +5, -5. Okay, let's go ahead and look at B. Okay, I would like to solve it using square root, so I need it to look like this. So I'm first going to solve it like a normal two-step equation until I get the n squared by itself. So I'm going, let's see, minus 47, I'll add 47. See, it's still 2 n to the second, so I'll divide by 2. I'm just doing normal solving techniques we did in chapter 1. And 50 divided by 2 is 25. Okay, now that the n to the second is isolated, the next thing I need to cancel is the squared. The opposite of square rooting, squaring is square rooting. So I'm going to square root to cancel the squared. If I do it to the left, I do it to the right. Okay, now the square root of 25 is actually only 5, but because it was quadratic, I know there's two answers. So one of my answers is +5. The other answer is -5. And again, you can write n equals plus or minus 5 if you would like to use that shortcut. Okay, for C, I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing. You can see this is in standard form, so I could try to factor it if I wanted, but today we're practicing square root. So 4f to the second minus 49 equals 0. I'm going to add the 49 to the other side. I'm trying to get the f by itself. Okay, I see it still has the 4 in front, so I'll divide by 4. Okay, 49 divided by 4 is a fraction, which is fine. Okay, now I have f to the second. To cancel this squared on the f squared, I have to square root it. If I square root the left, I square root the right. Okay, now when I get my answer, because this was a quadratic, I should get two answers. So one of them is, well, what's the square root of 49? 7. What's the square root of 4? 2. 7 over 2 is one of my answers. But then I also get -7 over 2, because if I square -7 over 2, I also get positive 49 over 4. Okay, we're going to keep going. This is the basic strategy we're going to use for all of them, but for the next row, we're going to get irrational solutions. Okay, so for D, it's 3m to the second minus 5 equals 1. So just solve like normal until I isolate the m squared. Okay, there it is. M to the second equals 2. So to cancel the squared on the m squared, I square root it, left, right. Okay, now the square root of 2 is, well, it's not 1 because 1 times 1 is 1. So the square root of 2 is irrational. I don't know what the solution is. It's some kind of crazy decimal. So the square root of 2 stays the square root of 2. But then I'm also going to get the negative square root of 2. Because if I square a negative, it still turns out positive. And again, if you would like to write this the lazy way, you write positive, negative, square root 2. And that's the same answer. Okay, let's look at E. Let's see, minus 13 plus 13. Okay, I have I squared equals 20. That's perfect. So now I'm on the square rooting step. The square root and the squared cancel. The square root of 20, I don't know the square root of 20. It's irrational. But you know what? I can simplify the square root of 20 because what two factors multiply to get 20? I could do 4 times 5, and then the square root of 4 is actually 2. So one of my answers is actually 2 square root 5. But because it was quadratic, I should get 2 solutions. So I'm also going to get negative 2 square root 5. Okay, and again, you could write this as plus, minus, or positive, negative 2 square root 5. It's the same answer. And I'm fine with you writing it that way. Okay, let's look at F. Negative 7 plus 9m to squared equals 10. So it's a negative 7, so I'll add this 7 to the other side. Divide by 9. Okay, I have m squared equals 17 over 9. So to cancel the squared, I will square root it. Square root the left, I have to square root the right. And see, now the square root of 17. I don't know the square root of 17. Can I simplify it? No, because 17 times 1 is all I have. Do I know the square root of 9? I do. The square root of 9 is 3. So one of my solutions is square root 17, and I keep the radical on the 17 because it's irrational. But the square root of 9 is a 3, so I write a 3 all by itself at the bottom. Then I can also get the negative version of this answer because when I square a negative, I still get a positive. Okay, and that's true because this started out as m squared, which is quadratic. Quadratics have 2 solutions normally. Okay, last 3. And these ones just have something that's a little different, but we can still solve them. Okay, so like, let's see, I'm going to minus the 20. Cancels. 16 minus 20 is negative 4. I'll divide by negative 4 because I'm still trying to isolate the m squared. Okay, negative 4 divided by negative 4 makes it positive. 4 divided by 4 is 1. Now that the m squared is isolated, I can square root both sides. Okay, what is the square root of 1? The square root of 1 is 1 or negative 1. So I could write positive negative 1. Or you could write 1 comma negative 1 to include both answers. Okay, let's look at h. See, x squared plus 5 equals 5, so I'll minus the 5 over. Okay, so I isolated the x squared, so I can go ahead and go to the square rooting step. Okay, now when I write my answer, I get x equals the square root of 0 is 0. Now, what about the plus or minus 0? Positive 0, negative 0? 0 is actually neutral. It's neither positive nor negative. So this is the only time when you only get one solution for a quadratic. It's because it's 0, and the square root of 0 can't be positive and negative. It's just 0 because it's neutral. Okay, last one, x squared plus 10 equals 6. Okay, so I got n to the second equals negative 4, so I can go ahead and square root it. Okay, now the square root cancels the squared. What's the square root of negative 4? Let me think. If I do 2 squared, I get positive 4, so it's not 2. If I do negative 2 squared, negative 2 times negative 2 is still positive 4. So how do I get negative 4? I cannot get negative 4. So I'm going to write no real solution or no solution. When you get to Algebra 2, you will learn about imaginary solutions. But in Algebra 1, we stay with the real numbers. So if you try to square root a negative, we cannot square root negatives, so the answer is no solution.